take the pins out of the hem and mark where the hemline ends. Where the blue tape is, mark that with permanent pencil or ink for later reference points. Now I'm going to take the darts and seams apart on the right side of the garment. When taking out basting stitches, on one side of the stitch line, about every ½ inch, break the stitch. Then flip the garment to the inside and pull. Please disregard the pencil lines. The seam line that I'm going over with red is the correct side seam. Now let's press this flat, but if you notice I'm leaving the seam allowance turned under. I don't want to cut the seam allowance off, so if I need to put this together again, I can, but the sloper itself does not have seam allowance. So by pressing it under, I'll be able to trace this off onto paper without the seam allowance for pattern making purposes. Pressing under the side seam, pressing up the hem. And pressing the darts nice and flat. Pressing under the shoulder seam, seam allowance. The sloper will be 1/2 of the body and will work with the right half of the body. So right now I'm just going to measure off enough paper, this is tracing paper that I can see through, to trace off the right half of the front torso bodice. Take the edge of the paper, the straight edge, and align it with your center front line. Pin the paper down very securely. And let's trace all of the markings from the muslin to the paper. with a curve, connect or draw over the lines of the muslin. I'm using another curve here, but either this particular one or the plastic one, both are fine. I happen to really like this one. However, it often creates a lot of glare in filming, so I tend to use the plastic one more. Simply transferring all information from the muslin to the paper. Writing bra inside those two little lines, so later if I have any question, I'll know that that is where the bra strap on this particular model lands on her shoulder. Transferring all measurements. This is the mark that I drew when the muslin was on the model, indicating the depth of the lowest neckline that she might like for future reference. Connecting all the dots around the neckline. At center front, there is a right angle for about 1/2 inch. Connecting the dots around the armhole. And now to cut it out. Right here I'm just labeling the dart so that I know what that line is. I don't think I'll forget, but just in case. That's a line for a future dart, not a dart that's on this pattern. Preparing the paper for the back sloping. Taking the straight edge of the paper and bringing it down to the seam line. The 1-inch seam allowance in the muslin extends past the paper so that you do not work the seam allowance into the sloper. Once again, the sloper has no seam allowance. That is added after the pattern is developed. A sloper is a master pattern from which all others are developed, with no seam allowance at that point. Transferring all markings from the muslin to the paper. Right here, I'm just checking measurements to make sure it's extremely accurate. I'm measuring from the waist to the hip, and they're accurate. Measuring from the armhole to the bust line and making sure that the same distance from the underarm hole to the bust line is the same on the back as the front. Measuring from bust to waist. And if it's a little tiny below where that dart is, that's not a problem. I'll just move the width at the waist of the dart down a fraction. Measuring waist to hip. There was a discrepancy between the hip line and the hem line from front to back in the paper. So I'm just checking that, correcting it. Marking the center back line. Connecting all the little markings around the armhole and neckline with my curve so that it's a perfectly uniform and curved line. Now let's just double check those side seams, fitting the waistline together and correcting the underarms so that they're exactly the same, as well as the hemline. Just getting a better line. Erasing any mistakes. Once again, just refining, making sure that when I lay the waistlines together, the bottom of the hemline below the hip is exactly the same on both sides. If there's a discrepancy, make sure that you change it so that they're the same. a right angle, at the center back neck for about 1/2 inch. The right angle is perpendicular to the center back line. Now I'm going to draw the length grain lines. I do this in red, and I don't do it close to the edge so it's not confused with the center back or front. I do it about 1.5 inches or so inside and parallel to the center backs and fronts. I put arrows at top and bottom, so if someone else is using my pattern, they know that the arrows signify length grain and not cross grain. Length, grain, line. Length, grain, line. Now it's a good idea to measure the armholes and neckline. Put your measuring tape on its side with the numbers closest to the table. Starting at 0, carefully measure. If it doesn't seem perfect, measure 2 or 3 times. Whatever that measurement is, write it right inside the curve. Now the neckline. These measurements are vital to making collars and sleeves and facings. The same for the back. See how I put the measuring tape on its side so it's standing up, and carefully work it around so you get a very accurate reading. I often measure this 3 times to make sure it's accurate. Write the measurement inside the curve. Now I'm just checking the shoulders. Yep, they're good. And what the measurement is on the front, on the outside and inside of the dart, should be the same as the back. I'm aligning the dart legs and double checking those neckline and shoulder lines. I'm going to trim a little tiny bit off the neckline because the back was a little bit too wide, and so was the back shoulder. Writing the measurement inside the appropriate segments. Measuring the back neck. Now side seams are sewn together. So I'm placing this paper sloper with the side seams together. The right side is the front, the back is the left side.